The tall glass doors of Le Chateau restaurant opened with a soft whoosh. Cool air from inside mixed with the warm evening air of Manhattan. Victoria Ashworth stepped out of her black limousine. Her expensive high heels clicked on the sidewalk. As she walked toward the restaurant, she wore a white dress that cost more than most people made in 3 months. Diamond earrings sparkled in her ears. Her blonde hair was perfect. Not one hair was out of place. Victoria was turning 50 today. She had planned this birthday party for weeks. Only the best restaurant would do. Only the richest friends were invited. She wanted everyone to see how successful she was. She wanted them to see how much money she had. The restaurant was famous in New York City. Rich people came here to eat and be seen. The food was expensive. A simple salad cost $60. A main dish could cost $200. But Victoria did not care about the price. Money was never a problem for her. Her late husband had left her millions when he died 5 years ago. Inside the restaurant, everything was beautiful. The ceiling was high with painted angels on it. Crystal lights hung down like frozen raindrops. The floor was made of white and black marble. It looked like a chessboard. Round tables had white cloth on them. Each table had fresh flowers and candles. The flowers smelled like spring. In the corner of the main dining room stood a black grand piano. It was huge and shiny. The wood was so polished that Victoria could see her reflection in it. No one played it during dinner time. It was just there, to look expensive and fancy. Most people who came to eat did not even notice it. They were too busy talking about money and showing off their jewelry. Victoria looked around the restaurant with happy eyes. This was her world. These were her kind of people. Everyone here had money. Everyone here was important. Or at least they thought they were important. Marcus Thompson walked between the tables carrying a silver tray. He was 28 years old and tall. His dark skin was smooth. His hands were strong but gentle. He wore the restaurant uniform, black pants, white shirt, and a black bow tie. His shoes were old but clean. He had polished them that morning before work. Marcus had been working at Le Chateau for 3 years. Every day was the same. He served rich people who looked through him like he was invisible. They snapped their fingers at him. They called him boy, even though he was a grown man. They complained about everything. The water was too cold. The bread was too warm. The service was too slow. But Marcus needed this job. He needed the money. Badly. His mother was sick. She had been sick for a long time. The medicine she needed was expensive. The doctors were expensive. Everything was expensive when you were poor. Marcus also helped pay for his little sister's college. She was smart and wanted to be a teacher. Marcus would do anything to help her dreams come true. Tonight was busy at the restaurant. All the tables were full. Rich people laughed and talked loudly. They drank expensive wine and ate tiny portions of fancy food. The women wore dresses that cost thousands of dollars. The men wore suits and watches that cost more than cars. Marcus moved carefully between the tables. He carried heavy trays without dropping anything. He smiled when people were rude to him. He said, "Yes, sir," and "Yes, ma'am," even when they treated him badly. His boss had told all the waiters to always be polite. "The customer is always right," his boss said, "even when they are wrong." Victoria sat at the biggest table in the center of the room. 12 of her closest friends sat with her. They were all rich women who had nothing to do but spend money and gossip. They talked about their new cars and their vacation homes. They talked about their plastic surgeries and their personal trainers. They complained about their maids and their gardeners. "This place is so elegant," said Margaret, one of Victoria's friends. She wore so much makeup that her face looked like a painted doll. "I just love coming here. It makes me feel so sophisticated." "The service is usually good," said another friend named Patricia. She had red hair that came from a bottle. "Though sometimes these waiters can be so slow. I think they hire them from the worst neighborhoods." Victoria laughed at this comment. She looked around the room until her eyes found Marcus. He was serving wine to a table near the window. His movements were smooth and professional. But Victoria did not see this. She only saw his skin color. She only saw what she thought was his place in the world. "Look at that one," Victoria said. To her friends, she pointed at Marcus with her wine glass. "He looks like he belongs in a cotton field, not a fancy restaurant." Her friends giggled. They thought Victoria was being funny. They did not think about how their words might hurt someone. They did not care. In their world, people like Marcus were not real people. They were just servants. Marcus heard some of their laughter, but he did not know what they were laughing about. He was used to rich people laughing at things he did not understand. He focused on his work. He had 6 tables to serve tonight. Each table wanted different things. Some wanted their wine glasses filled every few minutes. Others wanted extra bread. One man wanted his steak cooked 3 different ways. Before he was happy, the kitchen was hot and busy. Chefs shouted orders in English and Spanish. Pots and pans crashed together. Steam rose from the stoves. Marcus walked in and out of the kitchen dozens of times each night. His feet hurt by the end of his shift. His back ached from carrying heavy trays, but he never complained. After work, Marcus would go to his second job. He cleaned offices in a big building downtown. He worked from midnight until 6 in the morning. Then he would go home and sleep for a few hours. Then he would wake up and come back to the restaurant. This was his life every day except Sunday. On Sunday, he taught piano lessons to children whose families could not afford expensive teachers. Victoria did not know any of this about Marcus. She did not know that he was working 2 jobs. She did not know about his sick mother or his sister in college. She did not know that he was tired all the time but never showed it. She did not know that he was kind and smart and talented. All Victoria saw was a black man in a waiter's uniform. All she saw was someone she thought was beneath her. Someone she could make fun of for her own entertainment. The evening was just beginning. Victoria had no idea that this night would change everything. She had no idea that the man she was about to humiliate would soon shock everyone in the restaurant. She had no idea that her own life was about to be turned upside down, Marcus continued. To work unaware that he was being watched and judged. He did not know that soon everything would change for him too. The wine flowed freely at Victoria's table. Each bottle cost more than Marcus made in a week. The women's voices got louder as they drank more. Their laughter became sharper and meaner. They had moved from talking about themselves to talking about other people. They gossiped about friends who were not there. They made fun of people they thought were beneath them. Victoria felt powerful tonight. She was the center of attention. Her friends hung on every word she said. They laughed at all her jokes, even the ones that were not funny. This was how she liked it. She enjoyed being the queen of her group. "More wine," Victoria called out. She raised her empty glass in the air and waved it around. The sound of her voice cut through the gentle conversations at other tables. Some people turned to look at her table. They frowned at the loud noise. Marcus saw Victoria's signal. He picked up a fresh bottle of wine from the bar. The bottle was heavy and expensive. He walked carefully toward Victoria's table. His steps were quiet and smooth. He had learned how to move without making noise. Rich people did not like to be disturbed by the sound of footsteps. As Marcus approached the table, Victoria's friends watched him. They whispered to each other behind their hands. Their eyes followed his every move. They looked at him like he was some kind of strange animal in a zoo. "Here comes our entertainment," whispered Margaret to the woman next to her. "Victoria always knows how to make things interesting." Marcus reached Victoria's table. He stood beside her chair and carefully poured wine into her glass. The dark red liquid swirled as it hit the bottom of the glass. He was very careful not to spill even one drop. He had been yelled at before for making small messes. "Thank you," Victoria said, but her voice had a strange tone to it. It was not really thankful. It was the voice someone uses when they are planning something mean. Marcus nodded politely. "You are welcome, ma'am. Is there anything else I can get for you?" Victoria looked at Marcus for a long moment. Her blue eyes studied his face. She saw how tired he looked. She saw the lines around his eyes from working long hours. But instead of feeling sorry for him, she felt amused. She thought his tiredness made him look weak. "Actually," Victoria said slowly, "there is something else you can do for us." Marcus waited. He had learned to be patient with difficult customers. Sometimes they wanted strange things. One man had once asked him to call his wife and lie about where he was. Another woman had wanted him to go outside and check if it was raining. Marcus always did what they asked as long as it was not against the law. Victoria pointed toward the grand piano in the corner. "Do you see that beautiful piano over there?" Marcus looked where she was pointing. "Yes, ma'am, I see it." "I bet you can play it, can't you?" Victoria's voice got louder. She wanted other people in the restaurant to hear her. "I mean, all your people are naturally musical, right? It's in your blood." The words hit Marcus like a slap in the face. He felt his cheeks get hot, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. But he kept his face calm. He had heard words like this before. Rich people often said things like this. They thought all black people were the same. They thought they all loved music and sports and nothing else. Victoria's friends started to giggle. They thought Victoria was being clever and funny. They did not see the hurt in Marcus's eyes. They did not care about his feelings. To them, he was not a real person with real emotions. "I don't know how to play piano, ma'am," Marcus said quietly. He hoped this would be the end of it. He hoped Victoria would just laugh and move on to something else, but Victoria was not done. The wine had made her bold and mean. She wanted to put on a show for her friends. She wanted to prove how much power she had over the people who served her. "Oh, come on," Victoria said. Her voice was loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "Don't be modest. I bet you're hiding some real talent under that uniform." Other diners started to turn and look at Victoria's table. Some looked annoyed at the noise. Others looked curious about what was happening. The restaurant was usually quiet and peaceful. This kind of loud behavior was not normal. Marcus felt all the eyes on him. He wished he could disappear. He wished he could walk away and never come back. But he needed this job. He needed the money. For his mother's medicine and his sister's school, he could not afford to lose his temper, no matter how badly these people treated him. "Why don't you go over there and play us a song?" Victoria continued. She was enjoying the attention she was getting. "I'll tell you what. If you can actually play a real song, not just random noise, I'll give you a $20 tip." $20 was a lot of money to Marcus. It would help pay for his mother's medicine. It would help buy groceries for the week. But the way Victoria offered it made him feel sick. She was treating him like a dancing monkey. She wanted him to perform for her amusement. Victoria's friends clapped their hands together. "Oh, what a wonderful idea," said Patricia. "This will be so entertaining." "I love live music with dinner," said Margaret. "Even if it's just that kind of music." The whole restaurant was quiet now. Everyone was listening to what was happening at Victoria's table. Waiters had stopped serving. Customers had stopped eating. Even the sounds from the kitchen had gotten quieter. Marcus stood very still. His heart was beating fast. His mouth felt dry. He looked at Victoria's face and saw the cruel smile on her lips. He looked at her friends and saw them waiting for him to embarrass himself. He looked around the restaurant and saw dozens of eyes staring at him. He thought about his mother lying in her hospital bed. He thought about his sister studying late at night for her exams. He thought about all the bills he had to pay and all the people who depended on him. He thought about how badly he needed this job. Marcus also thought about something else. Something he had not thought about in a long time. He thought about the piano lessons he had taken as a child. He thought about the hours he had spent practicing. He thought about the dreams he used to have before life got in the way. "Well," Victoria said impatiently, "are you going to play for us or not? We're all waiting." Marcus looked at the piano. In the corner, it was beautiful and expensive. He had walked past it hundreds of times but had never touched it. He had wanted to, but it was not for people like him. It was just decoration for rich people to look at. The restaurant was so quiet that Marcus could hear his own breathing. He could hear his heart beating in his chest. He could feel sweat on his forehead even though the restaurant was cool. Slowly, Marcus set down his serving tray on a nearby table. The silver tray made a small clinking sound as it touched the wood. The sound seemed very loud in the quiet restaurant. "Oh, right," Marcus said in a voice so quiet that people had to lean forward to hear him. "I'll play something for you." Victoria's eyes lit up with excitement. She thought she was about to see Marcus make a fool of himself. She thought she was about to get the best entertainment of the night. Her friends whispered excitedly to each other. They rubbed their hands together like they were watching a good movie. Marcus began walking toward the piano. Each step felt heavy. He was walking toward something that would change his life forever. He was walking toward a moment that would shock everyone in the restaurant, including himself, but none of them knew that yet. All they knew was that they were about to watch a poor black waiter try to play piano for their amusement. They had no idea what was really about to happen. Marcus walked across the marble floor toward the grand piano. His footsteps echoed in the silent restaurant. Every eye in the room followed him. Some people looked curious. Others looked uncomfortable. A few looked excited like they were about to watch a car crash. Victoria leaned back in her chair with a big smile on her face. She whispered to her friends, "This is going to be hilarious. I can't wait to see him try to figure out which keys to press." Her friends giggled quietly. They had their phones ready to record what they thought would be an embarrassing moment. They wanted to share the video with other people later. They wanted to laugh about it for weeks. At a table near the window, an elderly man with gray hair put down his fork. He had been eating quietly by himself, but now he was paying attention to what was happening. His name was Professor William Chun, and he taught music at a famous school. Something about this situation made him feel uneasy. Marcus reached the piano bench. It was made of the same shiny black wood as the piano. He stood there for a moment, looking down at the keys. The piano was even more beautiful up close. The keys were perfect white and black rectangles. Not one key was chipped or yellowed. This piano was worth more money than Marcus would make in 10 years. For a moment, Marcus remembered being 7 years old. He remembered sitting on a different piano bench in a small apartment. His grandmother had saved money for months to buy an old piano from a church. It was not beautiful like this one. Some keys stuck when you pressed them. Some keys made no sound at all. But his grandmother had taught him to play on that broken piano. "Any day now," Victoria called out. Her voice broke Marcus's memory. "We don't have all night." Marcus sat down on the bench. He adjusted it to the right height. This surprised some people watching. They had expected him to just sit down and start banging on keys. They did not expect him to know that piano benches could be adjusted. Marcus placed his hands on his knees. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The restaurant was so quiet that people could hear him breathing. Some people shifted in their chairs. The silence was making them nervous. What happened next changed everything. Marcus lifted his hands and placed them gently on the piano keys. His fingers found their positions without him having to look. His right hand rested on middle C, his left hand found the bass notes. For just a moment, his hand sat still on the keys, then Marcus began to play. The first notes that came from the piano were soft and beautiful. They floated through the air like butterflies. The sound was clear and perfect. Each note rang out with exactly the right volume and tone. Victoria's smile began to fade. This was not what she had expected. She had expected noise and mistakes. She had expected to laugh at Marcus. But the sound coming from the piano was actually ... good. Marcus was playing a piece by a famous composer named Chopin. It was called Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It was one of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano. Most people who studied piano for years could never learn to play it well. But Marcus's fingers moved across the keys like they had been born to play this music. The melody started simple and beautiful. Marcus's right hand played the main tune while his left hand played deep, rich bass notes. The music told a story without words. It spoke of sadness and hope, of struggle and triumph. People in the restaurant stopped everything they were doing. Conversations died in the middle of sentences. Forks stopped halfway to mouths, wine glasses paused in the air. Everyone was listening to the incredible music coming from the corner of the room. As the piece continued, it became more complex. Marcus's hands began to move faster. His fingers danced across the keys with perfect timing. The music grew louder and more intense. It filled every corner of the restaurant with beautiful sound. Victoria's mouth fell open. She looked like someone had hit her with a brick. Her friends had stopped giggling. They sat with shocked expressions on their faces. This was not the embarrassing show they had expected to see. At his table by the window, Professor Chun stood up so fast that he knocked over his water glass. Water spilled across his table, but he did not notice. His eyes were locked on Marcus. His heart was beating fast with excitement and disbelief. Marcus played on, lost in the music. His eyes were closed, but his fingers knew exactly where to go. The difficult parts of the piece required his hands to move in different directions. At the same time, his left hand played fast, complicated rhythms while his right hand played a flowing melody. It looked impossible, but Marcus made it look easy. The music built to a powerful climax. Marcus's whole body moved with the rhythm. His shoulders swayed slightly. His feet worked the piano pedals to make the sound richer and fuller. Every note was perfect. Every phrase was played with deep emotion and understanding. Some people in the restaurant had tears in their eyes. They had never heard piano music this beautiful in person. Even people who did not usually like classical music were moved by what they heard. Marcus transitioned smoothly into another piece. This one was by a composer named Rachmaninoff. It was called Piano Concerto No. 2. This piece was even more difficult than the first one. It required incredible skill and years of training to play correctly, but Marcus played it like he had been born to play it. His fingers flew across the keys with lightning speed. The music was powerful and emotional. It told the story of someone fighting against great odds. It spoke of pain and struggle, but also of beauty and hope. Victoria felt dizzy. She reached for her wine glass with a shaking hand. Nothing made sense anymore. The man she had insulted and mocked was playing piano better than anyone she had ever heard. He was playing music that she knew was difficult and expensive to learn. How was this possible? How could a waiter play like this? Where had he learned? Who had taught him? These questions spun around in Victoria's head, but she could not find any answers. Other people in the restaurant were having the same thoughts. They looked at Marcus with new eyes. This was not just a waiter anymore. This was an artist. This was a musician of incredible talent. The kitchen staff had come out to listen. Chefs and dishwashers stood in the doorway with amazed expressions on their faces. Even the restaurant's owner had come out of his office to see what was happening. Marcus played for nearly 10 minutes. When he finally finished the last note, the sound hung in the air for a long moment. Then the restaurant exploded with applause. People stood up and clapped as hard as they could. Some people shouted, "Bravo!" Others whistled and cheered. The sound of clapping filled the restaurant and spilled out onto the street. Marcus opened his eyes and looked around. He seemed surprised by the reaction. He had been so lost in the music that he had forgotten where he was. He had forgotten about Victoria and her cruel challenge. He had just been playing music the way he used to years ago. Professor Chun was clapping harder than anyone else. Tears were streaming down his face. He began walking toward the piano, pushing past tables and chairs. He had to talk to Marcus. He had to know who this incredible musician was. Victoria sat frozen in her chair. She was not clapping. She was staring at Marcus like she was seeing a ghost. Her world had just been turned upside down. Everything she thought she knew about people and talent and worth had just been proven wrong. The man she had tried to humiliate had just given the most beautiful performance anyone in the restaurant had ever heard. And Victoria realized with growing horror that she was the villain in this story, not the hero. Professor Chun pushed through the crowd of people who had gathered around the piano. His hands were shaking with excitement. His heart was pounding in his chest. He had been searching for someone for 2 years, and he could not believe his eyes. Marcus still sat at the piano bench. He looked overwhelmed by all the attention. People were coming up to him and shaking his hand. They told him how beautiful his playing was. Some people asked if he gave piano lessons. Others wanted to know where he had learned to play like that. "Excuse me," Professor Chun said in a loud voice. "Excuse me, please. I need to speak with this young man." The crowd stepped back to let the elderly professor through. Professor Chun walked up to Marcus and looked at him carefully. His eyes studied Marcus's face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "What is your name?" Professor Chun asked. "Marcus Thompson," Marcus answered. His voice was quiet and confused. He did not understand why this man was looking at him so strangely. Professor Chun's face went white. He grabbed the piano bench to steady himself. "Marcus Thompson," he repeated slowly. "You studied at Juilliard School of Music. You were my student." Marcus's eyes went wide. He stared at Professor Chun in shock. "Professor Chun? Is that really you?" "Yes, my boy, it's me." Professor Chun's voice was full of emotion. "I have been looking for you for 2 years. You disappeared right before your debut concert. No one knew where you went. I was so worried about you." The people standing around the piano gasped. Juilliard was one of the most famous music schools in the world. Only the most talented musicians could study there. If Marcus had been a student at Juilliard, that meant he was not just good at piano. He was extraordinary. Marcus looked down at his hands. They were still resting on the piano keys. "I had to leave," he said quietly. "I had no choice." "But why?" Professor Chun asked. "You were the most talented student I had ever taught. You were going to be one of the great pianists of our time. Your debut concert was sold out. Music critics from around the world were coming to hear you play." Victoria felt sick to her stomach. She was still sitting at her table, but she could hear every word. The waiter she had mocked and humiliated was not just a talented musician, he was a genius. He had been a student at the most famous music school in America. An older woman at a nearby table suddenly stood up. "Oh my goodness," she said. "I remember you now. You're Marcus Thompson, the piano prodigy. I read about you in the newspaper 3 years ago." More people began to recognize Marcus. They remembered seeing his picture in magazines and newspapers. He had been famous in the classical music world. Music critics had called him the next great American pianist. They had said he would be as famous as the greatest piano players in history. "I remember you too," said a man in an expensive suit. "You played at Lincoln Center when you were only 19. My wife and I went to see you. It was the most beautiful concert we had ever attended." Marcus closed his eyes. These memories were painful for him. They reminded him of dreams he had given up. They reminded him of the life he could have had. Professor Chun sat down on the piano bench next to Marcus. "Tell me what happened," he said gently. "Why did you disappear? Why did you give up music?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. The restaurant was silent again. Everyone was waiting to hear his story. Even Victoria leaned forward in her chair to listen. Finally, Marcus began to speak. "My father died in an accident," he said. "He was working on a construction site. A piece of equipment fell on him. He died instantly." Professor Chun put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "I'm so sorry, my boy. I didn't know." "The insurance company said it was his fault," Marcus continued. "They said he was not being careful. They refused to pay money to my family. We had to pay. For his funeral, we had huge medical bills from the hospital." People listening began to understand. Marcus had not left music because he wanted to. He had left because he had to take care of his family. "Then my mother got sick," Marcus said. "She has lupus. It's a disease that makes her very tired and weak. The medicine she needs costs thousands of dollars every month. Insurance only pays for part of it." Marcus looked around at all the faces staring at him. "I had to drop out of school to get a job. I needed to make money for my mother's medicine. And my father's debts. My little sister was only 16. She wanted to go to college, but we had no money." Victoria felt tears coming to her eyes. She had never thought about why people worked as waiters and cleaners. She had assumed they worked those jobs because they were not smart enough or talented enough to do anything else. She had never imagined that someone might work as a waiter because they were sacrificing their dreams to help their family. "So you've been working here for 3 years?" Professor Chun asked. "I work here during the day," Marcus said. "At night I clean offices downtown. On weekends I teach piano lessons to kids whose families can't afford expensive teachers." The man in the expensive suit shook his head in amazement. "You work 3 jobs?" "I do what I have to do," Marcus said simply. "My family needs me." Professor Chun stood up and faced the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in a loud voice, "you have just heard one of the greatest pianists alive today. This young man gave up a career that would have made him rich and famous. He gave it up to take care of his family. He is not just a great musician, he is a great human being." The crowd burst into applause again. But this time it was different. People were not just clapping for Marcus's musical talent. They were clapping for his character. They were clapping for his sacrifice and his love for his family. Victoria looked around the restaurant with new eyes. Every waiter and busboy and cook might have their own story. They might have dreams they had given up. They might be working hard to help people they loved. She had never thought about this before. A young woman with a notebook and camera pushed through the crowd. "I'm Sarah Martinez from the New York Times," she said. "I write about classical music. Can I interview you, Mr. Thompson?" "People need to hear your story." Marcus looked overwhelmed. "I don't know," he said. "I'm just trying to make a living. I'm not trying to be famous." "But you should be famous," Professor Chun said. "Your talent is too great to waste. You belong on the world's greatest stages, not serving wine to people who don't appreciate what they have." He looked directly at Victoria when he said this. Victoria felt her cheeks turn red with shame. The restaurant owner, a Frenchman named Jean-Pierre Dubois, came forward. He had been watching everything from the back of the room. His eyes were red from crying. "Monsieur Thompson," he said with a thick French accent, "I owe you an apology. I have owned this restaurant for 15 years. You have worked here for 3 years. I never knew who you really were. I never bothered to learn about your life or your dreams." Jean-Pierre looked around at his other employees. "I think I have not been a very good boss. I have treated my workers like they are not important. But you are all important. You all have stories and dreams." Marcus stood up from the piano bench. "Thank you," he said to everyone. "Thank you for listening to me play. But I should get back to work now. I have tables to serve." "No," said Professor Chun firmly. "Your work as a waiter is finished. You have much more important work to do." Victoria finally found her voice. She stood up on shaky legs and walked toward the piano. Her friends watched her with confused expressions. They did not understand what was happening to their friend. "Marcus," Victoria said quietly. When he turned to look at her, she saw kindness in his eyes despite everything she had done to him. This made her feel even worse. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I owe you the biggest apology of my life." Victoria stood in front of Marcus with tears streaming down her face. Her expensive makeup was running in black lines down her cheeks. She had never felt so ashamed in her entire life. All around her, people were staring. Some looked angry at her. Others looked disappointed. A few looked sorry for her. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," Victoria said to Marcus. Her voice was shaking. "What I did to you was terrible. I treated you like you were not human. I made fun of you because of the color of your skin. I tried to humiliate you in front of all these people." Marcus looked at Victoria with surprise. He had expected her to be angry or embarrassed. He had not expected her to apologize. In 3 years of working at the restaurant, no rich customer had ever said sorry to him for anything. "I thought I was better than you," Victoria continued. "I thought because I have money and you serve tables, that made me more important. I was so wrong. You are 1,000 times better than me. You are talented and kind and hardworking. You sacrificed your dreams to help your family. What have I ever sacrificed for anyone?" Professor Chun watched Victoria with interest. He had seen many rich people in his life. Most of them never admitted when they were wrong. Most of them never changed their minds about anything. But Victoria seemed genuinely sorry for what she had done. The reporter, Sarah Martinez, was writing everything down in her notebook. This was turning into a much bigger story than she had expected. It was not just about a talented musician working as a waiter. It was about prejudice and assumptions and what happened when people were forced to see the truth. "Mrs. Ashworth," Marcus said quietly, "you don't need to apologize to me. I'm used to people treating me this way. But that's the problem." Victoria said, her voice getting louder. "You should not be used to it. No one should treat you this way." "I should not treat anyone this way?" Victoria turned to face the entire restaurant, her voice carried to every table. "Everyone needs to hear this," she said. "I am a racist. I just proved it to all of you. I looked at this man and made assumptions about him because he is black. I thought he was stupid. I thought he was worthless. I was completely wrong." Her friends at her birthday table looked shocked. Margaret whispered to Patricia, "What is she doing? She's embarrassing herself in front of everyone." But Victoria did not care about being embarrassed anymore. She cared about telling the truth. "For 3 years I have been coming to this restaurant," Victoria said. "For 3 years Marcus has served my table. He has been polite and professional. Every single time. He has never been rude to me, even when I was rude to him. And I was rude to him many times." Victoria looked back at Marcus. "I called you boy, didn't I? You're 28 years old, but I called you boy like you were a child. I snapped my fingers at you like you were a dog. I complained about you to the manager when you did nothing wrong." Marcus nodded slowly. He remembered all of these things. Victoria had been one of his most difficult customers. She had made his job harder many times, but he had never said anything about it. He had needed the job too much to complain. "And the whole time," Victoria said, "you were more educated than me. You went to Juilliard. I'd barely finished college because I was too busy partying. You can play piano better than most professional musicians. I can barely play the radio." Some people in the restaurant laughed at this, but it was not mean laughter. It was sad laughter. They were beginning to understand how unfair the world could be. Professor Chun stepped forward. "Mrs. Ashworth," he said, "it takes courage to admit your mistakes. Most people would have just left the restaurant and pretended this never happened." "I thought about doing that," Victoria admitted. "When Marcus started playing, my first thought was to run away. I was so embarrassed. But then I realized that running away would not fix anything. It would not help Marcus. It would not make me a better person." The French restaurant owner, Jean-Pierre, was listening to everything. He felt guilty too. He had been Marcus's boss for 3 years, but he had never really talked to him. He had never asked about Marcus's life or dreams. He had treated Marcus like he was invisible. "Monsieur Thompson," Jean-Pierre said, "I also owe you an apology. I am your boss, but I have not been a good boss. I should have seen your talent. I should have treated you better." Marcus was overwhelmed by all the apologies. He was not used to rich people caring about his feelings. He was not used to being the center of attention for good reasons. "You don't understand," Marcus said to everyone. "I'm not angry at any of you. I know how the world works. I know that people like you don't usually notice people like me. I've accepted that." "But you should not have to accept it," Victoria said. "No one should have to accept being treated badly because of their skin color or their job or how much money they have." Professor Chun put his arm around Marcus's shoulders. "My boy," he said, "you have been hiding your light under a bushel for too long. You have one of the greatest musical talents I have ever seen. The world needs to hear you play." "But what about my family?" Marcus asked. "My mother still needs medicine. My sister still needs money for school. If I go back to music, how will I pay for these things? Musicians don't make much money unless they become famous. And most musicians never become famous." Victoria wiped the tears from her eyes. She had an idea, but she was not sure if Marcus would accept help from her. After the way she had treated him, she would not blame him if he never wanted to see her. Again, what if money was not a problem? Victoria asked carefully. What if someone helped pay for your mother's medicine and your sister's school? Would you go back to music then? Marcus looked at Victoria suspiciously. What do you mean? I mean that I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, Victoria said. I waste money on stupid things every day. I could easily pay for your family's expenses while you get your music career back on track. Marcus shook his head immediately. I can't take charity from you, Mrs. Ashworth, especially not after what just happened here. It's not charity, Victoria said quickly. Think of it as an investment. You are going to be a famous pianist someday. You are going to make millions of people happy with your music. I want to help make that happen, Professor Chun nodded eagerly. She's right, Marcus. With your talent, you could be performing in the greatest concert halls in the world within a year. You could make more money playing piano than you make working 3 jobs. The reporter, Sarah Martinez, looked up from her notebook. Mr. Thompson, if you don't mind me asking, what happened to your debut concert 3 years ago? The one that was sold out? Marcus's face became sad. The tickets had to be refunded. The music school tried to find me, but I had already moved out of my apartment. I could not afford the rent anymore. I was sleeping on my sister's couch and working 2 jobs just to pay for my father's funeral. The concert hall held your time. Slot open for 6 months, Professor Chun said. We kept hoping you would come back. We never filled that spot with another musician. Eventually, we had to give up and cancel the concert series. Victoria felt sick thinking about this. While Marcus was working day and night to pay for his father's funeral and his mother's medicine, she was buying new clothes and jewelry. While he was giving up his dreams, she was complaining about being bored. What was the debut concert supposed to be? Victoria asked. Marcus was going to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 with the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, Professor Chun said. It was going to be recorded and released as his first album. Music critics from around the world were planning to attend. The same piece Marcus had just played perfectly in the restaurant. Victoria realized that she had just heard a private concert that was supposed to happen on one of the world's greatest stages. We need to fix this, Victoria said firmly. We need to make this right. Victoria sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Her legs felt weak and her head was spinning. Everything she thought she knew about the world had just been turned upside down. She looked around the restaurant and saw it with completely new eyes. The busboy cleaning tables near the kitchen might be a poet or an artist. The woman washing dishes might have a college degree. The young man taking coats at the front door might speak 5 languages. Victoria had never bothered to find out. She had never bothered to see these people as real human beings with their own stories and dreams. How many other people have I hurt? Victoria whispered to herself. But her voice was loud enough for others to hear. Margaret, one of Victoria's friends, stood up from the birthday table. Victoria, what are you doing? She hissed. You're making a scene. People are staring at us. Victoria looked at her friend with disgust. Good, she said. Let them stare. Let them see what horrible people we are. We are not horrible people, Patricia said, joining Margaret. We are successful women. We have worked hard for what we have. Have we? Victoria asked. What work have you ever done, Patricia? You inherited your money from your grandfather. What work have I ever done? I married a rich man and spent his money after he died. Victoria stood up and pointed at Marcus. That man has worked 3 jobs every day for 3 years. He gave up his dreams to take care of his family. He cleans toilets at night so his mother can have medicine. When was the last time either of you cleaned a toilet? Margaret and Patricia looked embarrassed and angry. They were not used to being talked to this way, especially by their friend Victoria. You're being ridiculous, Margaret said. So he can play piano? That doesn't change anything? He's still just a waiter. He's not just anything, Victoria shouted. He's a human being. He's more talented and hardworking and decent than any of us. Other people in the restaurant were watching this argument with interest. Some of Victoria's friends looked ashamed. Others looked angry. A few got up and left without paying their bills. Professor Chun watched Victoria with growing respect. He had seen many people learn hard truths about themselves. Most people got defensive and angry. They refused to change. But Victoria was different. She was facing her mistakes head-on. "Mrs. Ashworth," Professor Chun said gently, "what you are feeling right now is called growth. It's painful, but it's necessary." Victoria wiped her eyes with her napkin. Her expensive makeup was completely ruined now. She looked like a raccoon with black rings around her eyes. But she did not care how she looked anymore. "I've been living in a bubble," Victoria said. "A rich white bubble where I never had to think about other people's problems. I thought the world was fair. I thought people were poor because they were lazy or stupid. I thought people were rich because they deserved it." She looked directly at Marcus. "But you deserve to be rich and famous more than I deserve anything I have. You've worked for everything you have. I've never worked for anything in my life." Marcus felt uncomfortable with all this attention and praise. He was not used to people talking about him like he was special. He was used to being invisible. "Mrs. Ashworth," Marcus said quietly, "you don't need to feel guilty about having money. Money isn't evil. The problem is when people with money don't care about people without money." "But I didn't just not care," Victoria said. "I was actively mean to you. I made jokes about you. I treated you like you were less than human. That's not just not caring, that's being cruel." Victoria thought about all the times she had been rude to Marcus over the past 3 years. She remembered snapping her fingers at him like he was a dog. She remembered complaining to the manager when Marcus brought her the wrong wine. Even though she had ordered 2 different wines and forgotten about the first one, she remembered sending back perfectly good food just to watch Marcus apologize and take it back to the kitchen. She remembered leaving tiny tips even when the service was excellent. She had done all of these things because she enjoyed having power over someone. "I was a bully," Victoria said out loud. "I was a rich bully picking on someone who could not fight back." The reporter, Sarah Martinez, was writing down everything Victoria said. This was turning into one of the most powerful stories she had ever covered. It was not just about a talented musician. It was about racism, classism, and what happened when someone was forced to confront their own prejudices. Jean-Pierre, the restaurant owner, was thinking hard about his own behavior. He realized that he had been just as bad as Victoria, but in a different way. He had not been openly rude to his employees, but he had ignored them. He had treated them like they were part of the furniture. "Monsieur Thompson," Jean-Pierre said, "how many of my other employees have talents I don't know about?" Marcus thought about this question. Carlos, who washes dishes, is an amazing artist. He draws pictures that are so realistic they look like photographs. Maria, who serves lunch, is studying to be a nurse at night school. She wants to help sick children. Roberto, who cleans the bathrooms, speaks 4 languages and helps immigrants fill out legal papers for free. Jean-Pierre's mouth fell open. He had employees who were artists, students, and community helpers. But he had never bothered to learn these things about them. He had never asked them about their lives outside of work. "Why didn't I know any of this?" Jean-Pierre asked. "Because you never asked," Marcus said simply. "Rich people don't usually ask poor people about their dreams." Victoria felt like she was going to be sick. She thought about her housekeeper, Rosa, who had worked for her for 10 years. Victoria knew nothing about Rosa except that she cleaned house well and was always on time. She did not know if Rosa had children or hobbies or dreams. She had never asked. She thought about her gardener, Miguel, who made her yard look beautiful. Every week, she had never learned his last name. She had never asked him about his family or his life. To her, he was just the gardener. "I don't even know my own employees' full names," Victoria said with horror. "I've had the same housekeeper for 10 years, and I call her Rosa. I don't know her last name. I don't know if she has children. I don't know anything about her except that she cleans my house." Professor Chun nodded sadly. "This is very common among wealthy people. They become so isolated from regular people that they forget we are all human beings with the same basic needs and feelings." "But it's not just about being wealthy," Victoria said. "It's about being willfully ignorant." I chose not to see Marcus. As a real person, I chose to treat him badly. I can't blame that on my money. Victoria looked around at her remaining friends. Most of them looked uncomfortable and wanted to leave. They did not like having this conversation. They did not like being forced to think about their own behavior. We need to do better, Victoria said to her friends. All of us need to do better. Speak for yourself, said Margaret coldly. I treat my help just fine. Do you know their names? Victoria asked. Do you know anything about their lives? Margaret was quiet. She realized she did not know much about any of the people who worked. For her, Victoria made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She took off her expensive diamond necklace and handed it to Marcus. I want you to have this, she said. Sell it and use the money for your mother's medicine. Marcus stepped back. I can't take that, Mrs. Ashworth. It's too valuable. It's not valuable, Victoria said. It's just expensive. What you did tonight, playing that beautiful music, that was valuable. The way you sacrificed for your family, that's valuable. This necklace is just a piece of jewelry that I bought because I was bored, Professor Chun smiled. He could see that Victoria was beginning to understand the difference between price and value. She was beginning to understand what really mattered in life. Mrs. Ashworth, Professor Chun said, I think you are ready to help us plan Marcus's return to music. Jean-Pierre Dubois stood in the center of his restaurant with tears streaming down his face. For 15 years he had owned Le Chateau. He had been proud of his elegant dining room and his expensive menu. But tonight he realized that he had been running his restaurant all wrong. Mesdames et messieurs, Jean-Pierre said in his thick French accent, addressing everyone in the restaurant. Ladies and gentlemen, I have something important to say. The restaurant became quiet again. People turned in their chairs to look at the restaurant owner. Jean-Pierre was a small man with graying hair and kind eyes. He had come to America from France 30 years ago with nothing but a dream to open a great restaurant. Tonight I have learned that I have been a fool, Jean-Pierre said. For 3 years I have had one of the world's greatest pianists working in my restaurant. But I never knew this because I never bothered to learn about my employees as people. Jean-Pierre walked over to Marcus. Monsieur Thompson, I am deeply ashamed. You have worked for me with dignity and grace. You have been professional and hardworking every single day, and I have treated you like you were invisible. Marcus shook his head. Mr. Dubois, you have been a fair boss. You pay me on time. You don't yell at me? Many bosses are much worse, but that is not enough, Jean-Pierre said passionately. It is not enough to simply not be terrible. I should have been good. I should have cared about you as a person. Jean-Pierre turned to face the entire restaurant. Again, I want everyone to know that Monsieur Thompson is no longer a waiter in this restaurant. From this moment on, he is our featured pianist. His salary will be 3 times what I was paying him before. The restaurant burst into applause. People cheered and whistled. Marcus looked shocked. He had not expected this at all. But Mr. Dubois, Marcus said, I can't accept that. It's too much. You don't need to do this because you feel guilty. I am not doing this because I feel guilty, Jean-Pierre said firmly. I am doing this because it is the right thing to do. You are the most talented person in this room. You should be paid like the artist you are. Professor Chun clapped his hands together with joy. This is wonderful. Marcus, this job will give you time to practice and prepare for your comeback concert. Victoria stepped forward. She was still holding her diamond necklace. Mr. Dubois, that's a beautiful gesture. But Marcus needs more than a job. He needs his medical bills paid. He needs his sister's college tuition paid. He needs to be free from financial worry so he can focus on his music. Victoria looked around the restaurant at all the wealthy diners. Everyone in this room has more money than they need. We spend thousands of dollars on a single dinner. We buy clothes that we wear once. We own cars that cost more than most people's houses. She held up her necklace. This necklace cost $50,000. I bought it because I was bored one afternoon. $50,000 could pay for Marcus's mother's medicine for 2 years. Other people in the restaurant began to murmur to each other. Victoria's words were making them think about their own spending habits. I propose that we all chip in to help Marcus, Victoria continued. Not as charity, but as an investment in art and human decency. A well-dressed man at a corner table stood up. I'll contribute, he said. My name is David Chun. He paused and smiled. No relation to Professor Chun. I own a chain of hotels. I'll donate $25,000 to help with medical expenses. A woman in a fur coat raised her hand. I'll pay for his sister's college tuition, all 4 years. Another man called out, I'll buy Marcus a new piano for his home so he can practice. Soon, people all over the restaurant were offering to help. Some offered money. Others offered services. A doctor volunteered to treat Marcus's mother for free. A lawyer offered to help with any legal issues. A music agent offered to help book concerts. Marcus was overwhelmed. He had never experienced anything like this. For 3 years he had struggled. Alone, he had worked multiple jobs and barely slept. He had watched his dreams slip away. And now, suddenly, dozens of strangers were offering to help him get his life back. I don't know what to say, Marcus said with tears in his eyes. This is too much. I don't deserve all this help. Yes, you do, Victoria said firmly. You deserve this and more. You've been punished for 3 years for having the bad luck to lose your father and have a sick mother. That's not fair. We're just trying to make things a little more fair, Professor. June was practically dancing with excitement. Marcus, with this support, you could be ready for a comeback concert in 6 months. I still have connections at all the major concert halls. Lincoln Center would be thrilled to have you back. The reporter, Sarah Martinez, looked up from her notebook. Mr. Thompson, how do you feel about all this? A few hours ago you were serving tables. Now you're being offered a chance to return to the concert stage. Marcus sat down on the piano bench. He needed a moment to process everything that was happening. It feels like a dream, he said quietly. A good dream that I'm afraid I might wake up from. Jean-Pierre walked over to his other employees who had gathered near the kitchen to watch everything. Carlos, Maria, Roberto, he called to them. Come. Here, please. The 3 employees walked over nervously. They were not used to being called out in front of customers. I want everyone to meet my other employees, Jean-Pierre announced. Carlos is an amazing artist who creates beautiful drawings. Maria is studying to be a nurse so she can help sick children. Roberto speaks 4 languages and helps immigrants with legal paperwork for free. The restaurant guests applauded for the other employees too. Carlos, Maria, and Roberto looked surprised and proud. From now on, Jean-Pierre said, I want to know about all of my employees' talents and dreams. This restaurant should be a place that supports people, not just a place that uses them. Victoria walked over to Carlos. I would like to see some of your artwork, she said. I collect art, and I'm always looking for new talent to support. Carlos's eyes went wide. You want to see my drawings? Yes, Victoria said. And, they're as good as Marcus says they are. I'd like to help you have an art show. Maria stepped forward shyly. Mrs. Ashworth, could I ask you something? Of course, Victoria said. The nursing program I'm in is very expensive, Maria said. I work here during the day and go to school at night. But I might have to drop out because I can't afford the tuition. Victoria smiled. Not anymore. I'll pay for your nursing school. Consider it an investment in healthcare. Roberto was too shocked to speak. He had never imagined that the rich customers he served would care about his volunteer work helping immigrants. Jean-Pierre looked around his restaurant with new eyes. This is what Le Chateau should be, he said. Not just a place where rich people come to show off their money. It should be a place where talented people are recognized and supported. Professor Chun nodded approvingly. This is how communities should work. People with resources helping people with talent and need. Victoria felt better than she had in years. For the first time in her life, she was using her money for something meaningful. She was helping real people achieve real dreams. Marcus, she said, I want to ask you something. When you have your comeback concert, will you dedicate one song to this night? To the night when everything changed? Marcus smiled. I'll dedicate the whole concert to this night, and to all the people who believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. The transformation of Le Chateau restaurant was complete. It had started as a place where rich people went to feel superior to others. Now it was becoming a place where people came together to support each other's dreams. 6 months later, the lights of Carnegie Hall shone brightly in the New York evening. Outside the famous concert hall, hundreds of people waited in line to get inside. The marquee above the entrance read, "Marcus Thompson, Comeback Concert." Sold out. Victoria Ashworth stood in front of Carnegie Hall wearing a simple black dress. Her jewelry was modest, just small earrings and a plain watch. She looked very different from the woman who had celebrated her birthday at Le Chateau 6 months ago. Her face was softer now, her eyes were kinder. "Mrs. Ashworth," called a familiar voice. Victoria turned to see Carlos, the former dishwasher, from the restaurant. He was wearing a new suit and carrying a portfolio of his artwork. "Carlos," Victoria said with genuine happiness. "How wonderful to see you here." "I wouldn't miss Marcus's concert for anything," Carlos said. "Did you hear? The art gallery in Soho wants to give me my own show next month." Victoria smiled proudly. "That's wonderful news." "I told you your artwork was special." Maria appeared. Next to them, wearing her new nursing school uniform. "Mrs. Ashworth, I just finished my first week of clinical training at the Children's Hospital. I love it so much. Thank you for making my dream possible." "You're making your own dream possible," Victoria said. "I just helped with the money. You're doing all the hard work." Roberto joined their group, carrying a briefcase. "I just came from my new job at the immigration law office," he said. "They hired me as a translator and legal assistant. I can help. Even more families now." Victoria felt tears of joy in her eyes. Seeing these three people achieving their dreams was better than any expensive purchase she had ever made. Professor Chun approached their group. He looked excited and nervous. "Tonight is going to be magical," he said. "Marcus has been practicing 8 hours a day for 6 months. He's better than he ever was before. How is his mother doing?" Victoria asked. "Much better," Professor Chun said. "The new medicine is working well. She's strong enough to come to the concert tonight. She's backstage with Marcus right now." Inside Carnegie Hall, the audience was settling into their seats. The concert hall was one of the most famous in the world. It had a beautiful curved ceiling and perfect acoustics. Many of the greatest musicians in history had performed on this stage. In the front row sat Victoria and her new friends from the restaurant. Jean Pierre had closed Le Chateau for the night so all his employees could attend the concert. The restaurant had changed completely over the past 6 months. It was still elegant and expensive, but now it was also warm and welcoming. Jean-Pierre had hired Marcus's replacement as a part-time waiter and full-time student. He had started a program to help his employees pursue their dreams while they worked. The restaurant had become famous, not just for its food, but for its kindness. Victoria had changed too. She had sold most of her expensive jewelry and clothes. She had given away half of her money to help other people achieve their dreams. She had started a foundation called Hidden Talents that helped working people pursue education and artistic careers. The lights in Carnegie Hall dimmed. The audience became quiet. Professor Chun walked onto the stage to introduce Marcus. "Ladies and gentlemen," Professor Chun said into the microphone, 3 years ago, the classical music world lost one of its brightest stars. Tonight we welcome him back home." The audience applauded as Marcus walked onto the stage. He wore a simple black tuxedo. His face was calm and confident. He looked like he belonged on this stage. Marcus sat at the beautiful concert grand piano. He adjusted the bench and placed his hands on the keys. For a moment he sat quietly, gathering his thoughts. 6 months ago, Marcus said into the microphone, I was working as a waiter in a restaurant. I had given up on my dreams of being a pianist. I thought my musical career was over forever. He looked out at the audience and found Victoria in the front row. Then something happened that changed my life. Someone challenged me to play piano as a joke. They thought I would embarrass myself. Instead, I found my way back to the music. I love, Marcus turned back to the piano. This concert is dedicated to that night, to the night when everything changed, to the people who saw past their prejudices and chose to help a stranger, to the power of second chances. Marcus began to play. The first piece was Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, the same piece he had played in the restaurant 6 months ago, but this time it sounded even more beautiful. 6 months of practice and emotional healing had made Marcus an even better musician. The music filled every corner of Carnegie Hall. People in the audience closed their eyes and let the beautiful sounds wash over them. Some people cried, others smiled with pure joy. Everyone felt the power of Marcus's talent and the emotion in his playing. For the next 2 hours, Marcus played some of the most difficult and beautiful piano music ever written. He played Rachmaninoff and Beethoven and Mozart. Each piece was perfect. Each note was exactly where it should be. During intermission, Victoria met Marcus's mother and sister backstage. Mrs. Thompson was a small, gentle woman who looked much healthier than she had 6 months ago. Marcus's sister Kaisha was a bright college student who reminded Victoria of her younger self, but with more purpose and kindness. "Thank you," Mrs. Thompson said to Victoria, holding her hands. "You saved my son's life. You saved our whole family." "Your son saved himself," Victoria replied. "I just helped clear the path." Kaisha hugged Victoria tightly. "Because of you, I'm going to graduate from college debt-free. Because of you, my mother is healthy. Because of you, my brother is living his dream again." Victoria felt overwhelmed by gratitude, not for being thanked, but for being allowed to be part of this family's healing. The second half of the concert was even more powerful than the first. Marcus played with passion and joy that lifted everyone in the audience. For the final piece, he played Amazing Grace, arranged for solo piano. It was the same song he had mentioned wanting to dedicate to people who had been judged unfairly. When the last note faded away, Carnegie Hall exploded with applause. The audience stood and clapped for 15 minutes. People shouted "Bravo!" and threw flowers onto the stage. Critics who had reviewed thousands of concerts said it was one of the most moving performances they had ever heard. Marcus stood at the piano and bowed to the audience. Tears streamed down his face. He had thought this moment would never come again. He had thought his dreams were dead forever. As he left the stage, Marcus was surrounded by reporters and music industry executives. Everyone wanted to book him for concerts. Record companies wanted to sign him. Music festivals wanted him to headline their events, but the person Marcus wanted to see most was Victoria. He found her waiting by the stage door with tears of joy on her face. "Thank you," Marcus said simply. "Thank you for seeing me as a human being when I had forgotten that I was one." Victoria shook her head. "Thank you for reminding me what really matters in life. Thank you for showing me that talent and dignity exist everywhere, even in places I never thought to look." They stood together outside Carnegie Hall as people walked past them on the sidewalk. 6 months ago, they had been a racist rich woman and an invisible waiter. Tonight, they were friends who had changed each other's lives forever. Marcus's story became famous around the world. Videos of his restaurant performance went viral on social media. His comeback concert was written about in newspapers and magazines everywhere. But the most important part of the story was not Marcus's musical talent. It was the lesson about not judging people by their appearance or their job. Victoria used her experience to speak at schools and conferences about prejudice and privilege. She told people that everyone has hidden talents and dreams. She encouraged wealthy people to see the humanity in everyone they meet. Marcus went on to become one of the most celebrated pianists of his generation. He performed with the greatest orchestras in the world. His albums won awards and sold millions of copies. But he never forgot where he came from, or the people who helped him. Every year on the anniversary of that night at Le Chateau restaurant, Marcus gave a free concert for service workers and their families. He wanted to remind people that talent exists everywhere, waiting to be discovered and supported. And every year, Victoria sat in the front row, grateful for the night that transformed a cruel joke into a life-changing moment of truth and redemption.